It was the summer I turned 12, a season thick with humidity and the kind of oppressive heat that sticks to your skin, making everything feel like it's pressing in on you. My mom, my younger brother, and I were staying in a hotel in a bustling city. We were there to visit some extended family, but we chose not to stay in their house. My younger brother Eli and I sat quietly on the couch in the hotel lobby, tired from the drive. I was responsible for him since he was several years younger, and my mom had made it clear that I had to keep an eye on him while she checked us in. As we waited, I couldn't help but notice a man walk through the doors. He was in his mid-40s, with unremarkable features, nothing that would make him stand out in a crowd, but there was something unsettling about the way he entered. He didn't approach the counter like the other guests. Instead, he walked directly to the couch opposite ours and sat down. He didn't look at me, but I felt his presence, heavy and watchful. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I tried to shake off the unease, but I couldn't stop glancing at him. Maybe I was being paranoid, but something about the way he settled into that chair, like he was waiting for something, or someone, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was nothing. My mom called us over then, telling us that our room was ready, and we moved on. Later that day, after we'd settled into our room and spent time with family, my mom suggested we go for a swim to unwind. Eli and I changed quickly, eager to cool off in the pool. A few minutes after we arrived, the man from the lobby walked in again, this time in jeans and a sweater, definitely not swimming attire. He didn't seem interested in joining the water, but there he was, sitting by the poolside, his eyes occasionally flicking in our direction. I saw my mom's face change. Her relaxed demeanor from earlier had shifted into something tense. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. She pointed him out to me, quietly telling me that if he didn't leave in 5 minutes, we were heading back to the room. 5 minutes passed, and he didn't budge. We gathered our things quickly and left, but a sick feeling lingered in my gut. When we returned to the room, it was already getting late. We had rented a movie and were planning to watch it before heading to bed. As we settled in, I could tell my mom was still on edge. The man's strange presence had clearly unsettled her, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Halfway through the movie, my mom got up to take a shower. I was left alone with Eli, and the quiet of the room felt suffocating. Then, a knock on the door shattered the silence. "Housekeeping!" a voice called from the other side. I was confused. It was already late, well past the time when housekeeping would normally be making rounds. But we needed an extra towel, so I reluctantly got up and opened the door. What I saw froze me in place. It was him, the same man. He smiled at me, a slow, unsettling grin, and gave me a small, almost mocking wave. My heart pounded in my chest as my mind raced, going straight to the worst possible scenarios: kidnapping, violence, God knows what else. He stood there, the smile never leaving his face, while I just stood frozen, too paralyzed to move. The sound of water shutting off from the bathroom made me jump. My mom must have heard it too, because in that moment she emerged from the bathroom. Her eyes went wide as she saw the man standing there, and without a second thought she yanked me backward, slamming the door shut with a force I didn't know she had in her. She locked it quickly, her hands shaking. "Stay here," she whispered fiercely. She grabbed the phone and dialed the front desk, her voice tight with fear as she reported the incident. I could barely breathe as I stood there, heart hammering in my chest. My mom was speaking quickly, insisting that we needed to move rooms. I wanted to call the police, but she was already handling it, her mind working faster than mine. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, quick steps, stomping down the hallway away from our room. The man was leaving. We didn't waste any time. We packed up our things and switched rooms immediately. My mom made sure we were safe, but I could still feel the lingering sense of dread that had wrapped itself around me like a suffocating fog. We never saw the man again during our stay, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been following us, watching us, waiting. The next day when we checked out, I caught a glimpse of him in the lobby. He wasn't looking at me, but I could feel his eyes on my back as we walked past. My pulse raced again. I don't know what he wanted, or if he was just an ordinary creep who wandered too far, but I'll never forget the way he looked at us. like he knew exactly who we were and where we'd be. I still think about it sometimes. The thought of him lurking just outside our door, waiting for us to let our guard down, sends a shiver down my spine. To this day, I wonder if we were just another target, or if there was something worse lurking behind that innocent smile. Have you ever had that sinking feeling staying in a hotel room, especially when you're all alone? It's that odd sense of dread, that inexplicable discomfort, as if someone's watching you, even when you know there's no one there. Well, I've had my fair share of nights like that. When I was younger, I was terrified of staying in hotel rooms. I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was hiding just out of sight. I'd stare into the dark corners of the room, my mind racing with every creak and groan of the building. I would always beg my parents to let me sleep between them. It was bad enough that it drove them crazy too, but I couldn't help it. I needed to feel safe. But as I got older, I had to pretend I wasn't afraid anymore. I started sleeping alone in hotel rooms, just like any grown-up would. At least, that's what I told myself. By the time I was 24, I was living on my own, traveling for work. Business trips were a regular part of my life, but no matter how many hotels I stayed in, I still couldn't shake that lingering sense of dread. On one particular trip, I found myself in North Carolina, staying at a Comfort Inn. The hotel was across from a giant car dealership, and it seemed like the kind of place you wouldn't think twice about. But something about this night felt off from the moment I walked into the room. I had a day off, so I planned to watch a few movies, order some food, and relax. It was supposed to be a quiet night. I started with Saw, the first movie in the series. It wasn't exactly lighthearted, but I was in the mood for something intense. During a scene where the character Adam hears strange sounds in his apartment, something inside me snapped. I heard it too, the same crackling sound coming from my hotel room closet. I dismissed it at first. It's just the building settling, I told myself. But the noises didn't stop. They were faint, almost imperceptible, but they were there, every minute or so, like someone shifting around inside the closet. It was as if something was moving, or worse, something waiting. I tried to ignore it, cranking up the volume on the TV and pushing the thoughts out of my mind. But childhood memories of dark hotel rooms, of staring into corners, flooded back. I remembered how I'd begged my parents to check every closet and under the bed before I could even think about sleeping. "Get over it," I whispered to myself. But then the sound came again, this time louder. The crackling was unmistakable. My heart began to race. I popped 2 sleeping pills into my mouth, telling myself I needed to sleep. I didn't want to be awake for whatever this was. Within 10 minutes, the pills started to take effect, and my eyelids grew heavy. But the moment I slipped into sleep, it felt as if the atmosphere in the room changed. The air felt heavier, colder. My dreams twisted into nightmares. Suddenly, I was awake again. This time, the sound was different. It wasn't the crackling of the closet anymore. No, this time it was something more immediate. I could hear the faint rustle of fabric, something, or someone, moving in the room. I snapped upright, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was pitch black, so dark I couldn't see a foot in front of me. But then I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of someone shifting, moving through my stuff. My bag, the one I had thrown onto the chair by the desk, was being rifled through. I froze, unable to breathe. I could hear the rustling getting louder, closer. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tried to control the panic rising in my chest. What the hell? I flicked on the bedside lamp, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A figure. A tall, lanky man dressed in black from head to toe, his face obscured by a hood. He was rummaging through my bag, at least 6 feet 5 inches, easily towering over me. His hands were moving quickly, and when he heard the light click on, he froze for a second, his head snapping in my direction. My heart stopped. My mouth went dry. Everything I had been afraid of as a kid, the dark figure lurking just outside my vision, was standing in front of me in my very room. It wasn't just my childhood fears. It was real. The fear I had felt in hotel rooms for years had come to life. Before I could even scream, the man's head jerked back down to my bag as if he didn't even care that I had caught him. The room was silent for a moment, my breath caught in my throat. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, as if it was trying to escape. And then, I screamed. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life, the sound tearing through the air, breaking the silence of the night. The man's head snapped back up, his eyes wide, his mouth forming a twisted smile before he darted toward the door. In seconds, he was gone. I didn't even have time to process what had happened. My brain was too foggy with terror. But the immediate realization hit me. He'd stolen my wallet and my watch. It wasn't just a robbery. It was a violation of my space, my security. He had been in my personal space while I was sleeping. I rushed to the door, checking the hallway, but he was already gone. I couldn't hear a thing. The building was eerily silent once again. I locked the door and collapsed on the bed, trying to calm myself, but it didn't help. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of his presence, lingering in the corners of my mind. I stayed up, wide-eyed, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't woken up. What if I hadn't turned on the lamp? What if he had stayed hidden, silently watching me while I slept? The next morning, I tried to act normal, to convince myself that it was just an isolated incident. But I knew deep down that it wasn't. Something had changed. The fear that had been a part of me for years, the fear of the unknown, of the things that could be lurking in the dark, had come back, and it had taken shape in the most horrifying way possible. But it wasn't just the robbery that haunted me. It was the realization that I was never really safe. Not in a hotel, not in my own home. The shadow of fear was always there, waiting for the right moment to creep back into my life. That night was the beginning of something else, something I still don't fully understand. The events that followed were even more unsettling, things that I still can't explain. But one thing was certain. I would never look at hotel rooms or the dark corners within them the same way again. It was a warm May evening, and I had found myself once again staying in a hotel for the night. It wasn't like I was visiting some tourist-heavy town. This place wasn't exactly a vacation destination. My room was located on the second floor, right in the middle of a quiet hallway. As I walked to my room, I noticed how eerily empty the hotel seemed, as if I was one of the only people staying there. I had just finished relaxing by the pool and decided to spend the rest of the evening in my room. The kind of evening you dream of after a long day, quiet, away from the chaos of life. I kicked back, turned on the TV, and sunk into the bed. But it was only moments after I got comfortable when I heard a faint, rhythmic tapping on the door. I froze. It was strange. I didn't expect housekeeping to come by, especially with the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the handle. I waited for a voice to call out, maybe housekeeping, but there was only silence. Then, unexpectedly, the sound of a beep, the unmistakable sound of the door lock disengaging. The door slowly creaked open. I called out, half expecting it to be housekeeping. "No, thank you, not right now," I said, trying to sound polite. I was curious, but also slightly irritated that they hadn't bothered to announce themselves. There was a pause, a brief silence that stretched longer than it should have. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut. The sudden sound made my heart skip a beat, and I felt a chill spread down my spine. Was it a mistake? Did I hear someone leave? I got up quickly, thinking of confronting the employee for their rude behavior. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I glanced to my right, but there was no one there. Then I looked to my left, and there, at the far end of the hallway, I saw the figure of a woman, just her right leg turning the corner and disappearing out of sight. My stomach churned. How had she moved so quickly? I ran toward the end of the hall, every step faster than the last. My breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. I reached the corner and turned, only to find an empty corridor. I looked to my right and left. There were no other guests in sight, no sign of anyone at all. Just the eerie silence of a deserted hotel. But that wasn't the worst part. As I stood there trying to make sense of what I had just seen, another door slammed shut somewhere in the distance. My pulse raced as I turned and sprinted back down the hall, my feet echoing in the empty space. But when I rounded the corner, there was nothing. No woman, no employee, just the quiet, vacant hotel. My mind raced. What was going on? Who was that woman? And why was she acting so strange? I rushed downstairs to the front desk, my heart still hammering in my chest. The woman behind the counter seemed unfazed when I told her what had happened. She simply said, "Oh, that must have been Rosa. I'll talk to her about slamming doors later." I was beyond confused, but at the moment I couldn't get the words out. I just nodded and left to grab some food at the nearby TGI Fridays to calm my nerves. When I returned to the hotel, I felt a strange sense of unease in the air, but I tried to shake it off. I called my mom to talk about the situation with my dad. The argument still weighed on me heavily, and it made me feel more disconnected than ever. I told her how depressed I was about everything, my family, the constant fighting, and she reassured me, telling me I shouldn't worry about it. After hanging up, I tried to focus on the TV. I brushed my teeth, settled into bed, and tried to forget about the odd encounter earlier. But the night wasn't over. At around 9 p.m., I was jolted awake by a strange noise. At first, I wasn't sure what it was. The room felt cold, the air thick with tension. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in bed, listening carefully. And then, I heard it again. A low, almost whispered voice. "You have to let them in." I froze. There at the left edge of my bed, a figure towered over me. A woman. Her face was blurred, but the shadow of her presence was undeniable. The stench of something rotten filled the air. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt my stomach lurch. Before I could scream, she grabbed my throat with an iron grip. Her hands were cold and clammy, her fingers digging into my skin as she repeated the same words over and over. "You have to let them in." I fought back with every ounce of strength I had. Her grip was weak, frail even, but it didn't stop the overwhelming sense of dread. I managed to escape her grasp, stumbling backward toward the door. The woman's eyes burned into mine, and I could hear her following me, her footsteps heavy and deliberate. I bolted out of the room, my heart in my throat, and ran down the hall. I could hear her behind me, but when I reached the front desk, the woman behind the counter admitted something that made my blood run cold. One of the employees, she said, had lost her master key card, the key that could open all the rooms in the hotel. They were obligated to report it immediately, but no one had. I couldn't believe it. Not only had this woman entered my room, but she had tried to kill me, and no one knew what had happened to her. She had a master key, giving her access to every room in the hotel. I demanded a refund and gave the police my statement. After that, I left the hotel as quickly as I could, too shaken to even process what had happened. When I got home that night, my dad, still angry from earlier, seemed almost sympathetic after hearing what I'd gone through. But even after all of that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark had followed me home. The hotel was supposed to be a place of rest, a quiet escape, but it turned into a nightmare. I'll never know what happened to that woman, or why she targeted me, but one thing's for sure. After that night, I never felt safe leaving my house again.